The Meridian moved through the darkness of space like a single drop of water in an endless ocean. Captain Nathan Brooks had been flying this cargo vessel for 15 years, and he knew every weak point in her hull, every quirk in her engines, and every safe path through the dangerous regions of known space. The ship was not new, but it was reliable. That was what mattered in the merchant fleet. Reliability kept you alive. The cargo hold contained medical supplies worth more than a small colonial settlement. Antibiotics, surgical equipment, diagnostic machines, and vaccines filled the secure containers. They were headed to a research station in the outer colonies, a place that had been cut off from regular supply runs for 6 months, due to political complications and disputed territorial claims. The people there were desperate for these supplies. Nathan understood that the mission was important. He sat in the captain's chair on the bridge and watched the stars shift past the viewport. The artificial gravity hummed softly beneath his feet, keeping the crew grounded and steady as they traveled through the void. Around him, his crew worked at their stations. They were a small team, just 12 people total, but each one was experienced and capable. Nathan had chosen every member of this crew personally. Claire Adams was the sensor officer. She had worked with Nathan for 8 years and could read the scanners better than anyone he knew. She was smart and calm under pressure. She was also honest, which meant she would tell Nathan the truth, even when he did not want to hear it. Lisa Morrison managed the cargo and logistics. She had been with the Meridian for 10 years and knew the trading routes through the galaxy like some people knew their own hometown. She could negotiate with dock workers from 50 different species and always come away with a fair deal. Kevin Huang was the chief engineer. He was younger than the other senior crew members, only 30 years old, but he had the kind of instinct about machines that could not be taught. He knew how to fix the engines when they broke, and more importantly, he knew how to keep them from breaking in the first place. The rest of the crew consisted of navigation specialists, communications officers, cargo handlers, and support staff. They were all good people who did their jobs well. Nathan trusted them. On this particular day, Nathan was reviewing the route to the research station. The direct path was quick but dangerous. It ran through known pirate territories and areas where the local governments were unstable. The route they had chosen was longer, but safer. It took them through the Kepler sector, a region that was heavily monitored by the Galactic Commerce Authority. Nathan did not like the feeling of being monitored, but it was the lesser of two evils. Pirates and desperate soldiers were more of a threat than any government inspection. The bridge was quiet except for the steady beeping of the monitoring systems. This was the rhythm of space travel. Long hours of nothing punctuated by moments of intensity. Nathan had learned to find peace in this rhythm. It was better than the chaos of atmospheric flight or the unpredictable nature of Earth weather. He was thinking about the research station and the people waiting there when Claire's voice came through the intercom. There was nothing wrong with her tone, but Nathan had learned to recognize the slight change in her breathing. That meant something had caught her attention. She said that the scanners were picking up something at the edge of detection range. 3 signatures, she explained. Big signatures. She was running a detailed analysis, but the preliminary readings suggested multiple capital-class vessels moving in formation. Nathan sat up straighter in his chair. He asked Claire what direction they were heading. She checked the data for a moment and then answered. They were moving to intercept. She said it plainly, without any extra words. That was Claire's way. Nathan pulled up the tactical display on his own console. The 3 contacts appeared as blinking red dots on the screen. They were still far away, but they were moving fast. Much faster than normal merchant vessels. Capital-class ships, Claire had said. Those were the kind of ships that navies flew, not merchant companies. Nathan had been flying through space long enough to understand what this meant. No legitimate cargo inspection required 3 capital-class vessels. No simple customs check required ships moving at military speeds with that kind of formation discipline. He opened a channel to the crew. His voice was calm and steady when he spoke. He told everyone to assume stations and be ready for evasive maneuvers. He did not use the word danger or attack. He simply told them to be ready. The crew responded immediately. They were professionals. They did not ask questions. They moved to their positions and prepared the ship for action. Kevin was in the engine room, and Nathan heard him through the communication system. Kevin asked what he needed. He was already checking the power distribution system and running diagnostics on the jump drives. Nathan told him to stand by. They would know more in a few minutes. The 3 vessels grew closer on the scanners. Claire was now reading their specifications more clearly. They were Valorian ships. That was bad. The Valorian Collective was known for 2 things: military strength and a complete lack of patience for anything they considered beneath them. They had been expanding their territory for the past 5 years, taking systems and demanding submission from smaller species. But the Valorian Collective had no formal claim on the Kepler sector. This region was supposed to be neutral space, protected by the Galactic Commerce Authority. Nathan made a decision. He told Claire to plot a jump to the secondary navigation marker. It was a route that would take them through the Vex Nebula, a region of space that was known for extreme radiation, violent gravitational anomalies, and navigational hazards that made precise travel extremely difficult. Most experienced space captains avoided the Vex Nebula completely. The risks were too great. Ships had been lost in that region. Good ships with experienced crews had simply disappeared. But Nathan had taken the Meridian through the Vex Nebula before. 3 times in the past year, actually. The first time had been by accident, when a solar storm had disrupted their normal route. The other 2 times had been deliberate, when he wanted to avoid pirates or unfriendly governments. Each time they passed through, Nathan and his crew had logged the conditions. They had recorded the timing of the radiation storms. They had mapped the safe passages. That data was stored in the Meridian's navigational computer. It was accurate and detailed. The Valorian vessels did not have that data. They would be navigating blind in an environment that made their advanced technology worth far less than usual. Claire looked at him with surprise when he gave the order. She asked if he was certain about this choice. Nathan was certain. He told her to plot the jump. He told Kevin to prepare the engines for the jump sequence. He told Lisa to secure the cargo and make sure every container was locked down. If they had to make evasive maneuvers in the nebula, things could shake loose. They could not afford to lose any of the medical supplies. As the Meridian accelerated, Nathan watched the 3 Valorian ships pursue them. They were moving faster now, trying to close the distance before the merchant vessel could escape. But they were too late. Nathan watched the countdown on his console. 30 seconds. 20 seconds. 10 seconds. The Meridian engaged its jump drive, and the entire universe bent around them. The stars twisted and stretched. The 3 pursuing vessels fell away as the merchant ship left normal space behind. When the Meridian emerged in the Vex Nebula, alarms began sounding immediately. The radiation levels were extreme. The gravitational fluctuations were pulling at the ship from multiple directions. The navigational systems were struggling to maintain accurate readings, but Nathan was calm. He had his crew, he had his data, and he had something that the Valorian Collective had never developed. He had the ability to adapt to an environment that was designed to kill you. He had the will to survive when the odds were bad. He looked at Claire and told her to set course for the inner colonies. They would navigate through the nebula carefully and deliberately. They would use every advantage they possessed. In the distance, the 3 Valorian ships emerged from their own jump drives. Kreshtal, The commander of the Valorian forces looked at his tactical display with confused anger. The merchant vessel should have been an easy prize. Instead, it had led him into one of the most dangerous regions of known space. Kreshtal had spent 3,000 years watching his species dominate everything they encountered. He had never failed at something like this before. But looking at the swirling radiation storms and the unstable gravitational fields of the Vex Nebula, Kreshtal was beginning to understand that this hunt would not be as simple as he had believed. The Vex Nebula was a region of space that seemed to have its own rules and rhythms. Radiation did not flow in straight lines here. It pulsed and surged in patterns that followed the gravitational distortions created by invisible matter and dying stars. The nebula was like a living thing, breathing in and breathing out, creating danger at unpredictable moments. Nathan stood on the bridge of the Meridian and watched the three Valorian ships behind them struggle with the environment. The lead ship was already showing signs of stress. Its shields were cycling rapidly as they adapted to the radiation spikes. The electromagnetic interference was making their sensors unreliable. This was exactly what Nathan had expected. The Valorian ships were designed for open space combat. They were built for strength and power. But strength meant nothing here. Power meant nothing when the environment itself was trying to destroy you. Claire sat at the sensor station and monitored the pursuing vessels. She turned to Nathan and told him that the lead Valorian ship was now running at reduced power. Its shield generators were working overtime. The electromagnetic storms were getting worse too, she said. Every 6 minutes, the magnetic field spiked, and that knocked out their sensor coherence for a few seconds. Nathan nodded. He had documented exactly this pattern during his previous journeys through the nebula. The radiation storms came in waves, generated by the gravitational interactions between invisible matter and the remnants of ancient stars. The waves were predictable if you knew how to read them. He told Claire to monitor those spikes carefully. When the magnetic field spiked and the Valorian sensors went blind, that was when the Meridian would make its moves. That was when they would change course slightly, gain a small distance advantage, or reposition themselves in the nebula dot in the engine room. Kevin Huang was working with 3 other engineers to maximize the Meridian's capabilities. Kevin was young, but he was also brilliant. He understood the Meridian's engines the way a musician understands their instrument. He knew how much power he could push through them without breaking them. He knew how to balance speed and efficiency in ways that other engineers would have said were impossible. Kevin rerouted power from the secondary systems and funneled it directly into the jump drive. This gave them more options. They could make faster jumps between safe zones in the nebula. They could change direction more quickly if they needed to. They could sustain higher speeds through the dangerous regions without overheating the engines. The secondary systems they powered down were not critical. The crew would have less comfortable gravity, fewer lights in some areas of the ship, and reduced environmental controls in the cargo hold. But the cargo was sealed in special containers anyway. The medical supplies could survive without perfect environmental conditions for several hours. Nathan made the decision to push into the nebula at higher speed. It was dangerous, but it was also necessary. The Valorian ships were massive. They had more firepower and more shields than the Meridian. If they ever caught the merchant vessel in open space, the battle would be over in minutes. But here in the nebula, the Meridian had advantages. The merchant ship was smaller and more maneuverable. It consumed less power, which meant the engines could work harder without burning out. The crew knew this space in ways the Valorian ships did not. As they pushed deeper into the nebula, the radiation levels increased. The alarms on the Meridian's bridge sang their warnings constantly. But the crew was used to this now. They had learned to filter out the noise and focus on the important signals. Claire announced that the second Valorian ship was falling behind. It had reduced speed and was moving more cautiously through the radiation fields. Its shields were struggling against the constant bombardment behind the lead ships. The third Valorian vessel was in even worse condition. Its captain had decided that speed was too dangerous. The ship was moving slowly, almost cautiously, which meant it was losing distance rapidly. Nathan smiled slightly. This was how he had thought it would work. The Valorian commander would push forward with the lead ship because he was proud and because he believed his firepower would overcome any obstacle. The other two ships would hang back or struggle, giving the Meridian space to operate. He called Lisa on the communication system and asked her to prepare the cargo bay for potential impact. She asked if they were under fire. Nathan told her no, but he wanted the cargo secured in case they had to make sudden maneuvers. Lisa responded immediately. She was already in the cargo bay with her team, moving through the containers and checking the security locks. She asked if the crew should prepare for abandonment protocols. Nathan told her absolutely not. They were not abandoning anything. They were surviving and outrunning the Valorian ships. There was a difference. Nathan made a critical decision at this point. He told Claire to broadcast a distress call on all emergency frequencies. The message was simple and direct. The Meridian was a civilian merchant vessel carrying medical supplies. It was being pursued by unidentified military forces through the Vex Nebula. The crew was requesting assistance from any nearby vessel. Then Nathan did something unconventional. He told Claire to also broadcast the exact coordinates of the Valorian ships. He wanted her to include their heading, their weapon status, and the fact that they were pursuing a civilian cargo vessel without any legitimate authorization. He instructed Claire to send all of this information directly to the communications relay station at Outer Base 7. The transmission would be encrypted and would be received by the Galactic Commerce Authority within minutes. The message would include sensor data showing that the Valorian weapons were armed and ready. Claire looked uncertain. She asked if he was certain about this strategy. Broadcasting information about the pursuit would alert the Valorian commander that they knew exactly what he was doing. It would also bring official attention to the situation. Nathan told her that was exactly the point. He explained that the Valorian collective believed they could do whatever they wanted without consequences. They believed that military force gave them the right to attack civilian vessels. But that belief was based on the assumption that military action happened in isolation, away from official observation. Nathan was going to change that equation. He was going to make sure that every action taken by the Valorian ships was documented and recorded by neutral observers. That kind of documentation made victory complicated. Political complications could be worth more than weapons. Claire nodded and began the transmission. The data was encrypted and sent across multiple channels to ensure that at least some of the signal would reach Outer Base 7. Within 20 minutes, the response came back. A formal message from the Galactic Commerce Authority arrived on the Meridian's communication system. An investigation had been opened into the Valorian pursuit. The collective was being asked to stand down and submit to observation by neutral arbiters. Nathan understood what this meant. There were now observers in the region. Every action the Valorian ships took would be recorded. Every weapon discharge would be measured. Every tactical maneuver would be analyzed and documented. Kreshtal received the message from the Galactic Commerce Authority and felt something he had never felt before. It was not quite fear, but it was something close to it. The pursuit of a single civilian vessel should have been a simple task. Instead, it had become complicated. The Empire did not appreciate complications. He could still order the attack. He had the firepower to destroy the Meridian in seconds. But if he did, there would be consequences. Official investigations would follow. The Independent Systems Alliance would file complaints. There would be hearings and official findings. Kreshtal was beginning to understand that the human captain had done something remarkable. He had taken a military situation and transformed it into a political situation. And in political situations, even superior military force had limitations. The Meridian continued through the nebula, making small jumps and careful course corrections. Behind it, the Valorian ship struggled with the radiation and the gravitational anomalies. The hunters were beginning to fall behind, and neither side knew yet exactly how this situation would resolve. But Nathan Brooks was already planning his next move. He was thinking several steps ahead, using every resource at his disposal, and making the hunters understand that pursuing a human vessel was going to be far more complicated than they had ever anticipated. 3 weeks after the agreement with Crystal, the Meridian docked at Station Nexus 7 for the formally agreed upon customs inspection. The process was routine and bureaucratic, exactly as Nathan had expected it would be. A team of neutral inspectors, carefully selected from species that had no political bias in the region, came aboard the Meridian. The lead inspector was a Ketha, a species known throughout the galaxy for their obsessive attention to detail. The Ketha had 4 arms and eyes that could see in multiple wavelengths of light. They were perfect for inspection work because they did not play favorites and did not accept bribes. The inspection took 4 hours. The inspectors examined every container of medical supplies. They verified that everything in the cargo hold matched the manifest exactly. They checked the documentation and confirmed that all paperwork was in order. They looked at the medical equipment and confirmed that it was the quality specified in the original purchase. Agreements dot at the end of the inspection. The lead Keta inspector turned to Nathan and confirmed that all regulations had been satisfied. No violations had been found. The medical supplies were exactly what the manifest claimed they were. The cargo could be delivered to the research station without any issues. Nathan thanked the inspector and offered the traditional payment for the inspection service. The Ketha accepted and bowed slightly, a sign of respect from one professional to another. What Nathan did not expect was a personal communication request from Crystal, the Valorian. Commander's message arrived through official channels. It was surprising in its tone. Crystal stated that he had reviewed the tactical records of the pursuit through the Vex Nebula. He had consulted with his navigational experts about how a civilian cargo vessel had managed to execute maneuvers in the nebula that Valorian military vessels had struggled with. He had studied Nathan's strategy and had come to understand exactly what had happened. The human captain had recognized the Valorian weakness in an unfamiliar environment. More than that, he had used political and bureaucratic systems to neutralize a military threat. He had transformed a military problem into a diplomatic situation. Crystal wrote that he had been in the military for nearly 3 centuries. He had commanded forces in countless battles and pursued countless enemies. But he had never encountered anything like what Nathan Brooks had done. He had never seen a civilian captain take a position of overwhelming military disadvantage and transform it into a position of strength. Crystal wanted to meet, not as enemies, but as military professionals who had engaged in legitimate conflict and had both achieved their objectives through different means. Nathan considered this request carefully. It could be a trap. Crystal could be planning to capture or kill him when he left the protection of the station. But Nathan's instinct told him something different. Crystal sounded genuine. The Valorian commander sounded like someone who had encountered something unexpected and wanted to understand it better. Nathan accepted the meeting. He told Lisa Morrison that he was going to the meeting point on the orbital station. He asked Lisa to accompany him for security and documentation purposes. Lisa asked if this was dangerous. Nathan told her honestly that he did not know, but he thought it was important. He'd lived long enough to understand that many of the most important things in life were also the most dangerous. they traveled to the designated meeting point on a small shuttle. The station was large and neutral, home to thousands of traders and merchants from dozens of species. The meeting was scheduled for a conference room that was equipped with observation cameras, which gave Nathan some confidence that it would be genuinely neutral territory. Crystal was already there when Nathan arrived. The Valorian was taller than Nathan by a full meter. His scaled skin shifted color subtly as he moved through the light. His eyes were sharp and assessing, the eyes of someone who had commanded military forces for decades. But his demeanor was not hostile. He did not appear to be armed. Crystal stood and offered a formal military salute, a gesture that transcended species and culture. The salute meant respect. It meant acknowledgement of worthy opposition. Nathan returned the salute. He understood what was happening. Crystal was showing respect not for Nathan as a person, but for what Nathan had accomplished as a military strategist. Crystal spoke first. He said that the pursuit through the Vex Nebula had been the most instructive military engagement he had experienced in 3 centuries of service. He explained that Valorian ships were designed for dominance in open space. They had never operated extensively in regions where the environment itself was an opponent. Nathan had recognized this limitation and exploited it with precision and creativity. It was, Crystal said, exactly the kind of tactical thinking that separated survival from extinction in a galaxy that was far more complex than any single species' military doctrine could account for. Nathan responded with appropriate respect. He acknowledged that Valorian military capabilities were impressive, and that any merchant vessel crew facing them would be at a profound disadvantage. What the Meridian had possessed was local knowledge and a willingness to take risks that seemed irrational. From a purely military perspective, he explained that merchant captains lived in a different world than military commanders. Military thinking emphasized overwhelming force and strategic superiority. Merchant thinking emphasized survival and adaptation. When you were not the strongest, you had to be the smartest. Crystal found this observation fascinating. He asked Nathan about his background. Did he have military training? Nathan laughed. He told Crystal that he had been flying cargo routes for 15 years. Before that, he had been a merchant marine officer on Earth, sailing across oceans on water-based ships before he had ever traveled through space. Crystal's colors shifted in a way that Nathan recognized as the Valorian equivalent of surprise or deep thought. Nathan continued. He told Crystal that the skills were similar, whether you were sailing on water or traveling through space. You learned to read your environment. You understood the capabilities and limitations of your vessel. You made decisions when you had incomplete information and limited time to act. He told the Valorian commander that Earth was a very dangerous place. Humans had evolved on a world where everything tried to kill them at various points in their development. Natural disasters, predators, disease, and other humans all posed constant threats. Humans had learned to survive through adaptation, improvisation, and a stubborn refusal to accept that overwhelming odds meant certain defeat. Crystal was silent for a long moment. Then he told Nathan that Earth must be an unusual world. It must have created an unusual species. Nathan nodded. He told Crystal that humans understood something about survival that other species sometimes forgot. Survival was not always about having the biggest weapons or the strongest shields. Sometimes it was about having the determination to keep fighting even when the situation seemed hopeless. Sometimes it was about recognizing your enemy's weaknesses and exploiting them with precision. Crystal asked if Nathan would consider serving in the Valorian military. He said it as a genuine question, not as a threat or an ultimatum. Nathan smiled and told him no. He was a merchant captain, not a military officer. His place was on the Meridian, flying cargo through the galaxy and getting medical supplies to people who needed them. Kreshtal seemed to accept this answer. He stood and offered his hand. Nathan stood and took it. The handshake lasted longer than usual. A moment of genuine connection between two professionals who had tested each other and had both emerged with respect for what the other had accomplished. As Nathan and Lisa returned to the Meridian, Nathan understood that something important had happened. The pursuit through the Vex Nebula would be reported throughout the Valorian Collective. A merchant vessel had evaded a military pursuit. A civilian captain had outwitted a military commander. That story would change how the Valorian viewed humanity. It would establish a reputation that would spread through the galaxy over time. In many ways, this was exactly how human presence expanded through known space. Not through military dominance, but through a reputation for resilience and resourcefulness. Through the understanding that humans could survive situations that should have been impossible. 6 hours into the pursuit through the Vex Nebula, the second Valorian ship suffered a catastrophic failure in its shield system. The radiation had found a weakness in the power conduits that connected the shields to the main reactor. The Valorian engineers tried to compensate, but they did not understand the unique properties of the radiation in this region. The shield generators on the second ship began to fail one after another. The captain sent an emergency signal to Kreshtal, reporting that the vessel had been forced to drop back. Full combat capability was no longer available. The ship would need assistance or would need to withdraw from the nebula entirely. Kreshtal acknowledged the message, but his patience was wearing thin. He had been pursuing this single merchant vessel for nearly 8 hours. Instead of a simple victory, he had accumulated system failures, political complications, and a growing list of problems that made no logical sense according to Valorian military doctrine. On the Meridian, Nathan monitored the situation with the careful attention of a captain who had survived 15 years in the merchant fleet. The pursuing vessels were becoming less coordinated with each passing hour. The Valorian command structure depended on rapid strategic coordination and instant obedience. But circumstances were moving faster than their ability to adapt. Nathan called the crew to a meeting in the common area. 12 people gathered around a simple table. They were tired from working at high intensity for hours, but they were alert and ready to listen. Nathan told them that they had done something remarkable. They had taken their weaknesses and transformed them into strengths. The Valorian fleet had expected the usual sequence of events. They would pursue, the merchant vessel would flee or surrender, and the transaction would be complete. But this time, the equation was different. Nathan explained that they had forced the confrontation into a space where the Valorians' advantages did not matter. They were no longer fighting a military battle in the traditional sense. They were instead challenging the Valorian ability to adapt and overcome unfamiliar obstacles. Kevin Wong asked the question that was on everyone's mind. He wanted to know what would happen if the Valorian commander decided that the cost of continued pursuit was too high. Would they simply abandon the chase? Nathan considered this carefully before answering. It was possible, he said. That was always a possibility. But Kreshtal had already invested considerable resources into this pursuit. 3 ships, hundreds of hours of fuel, and most importantly, his reputation as a military commander. The Valorian Collective did not take kindly to captains who abandoned hunts once they had begun them. Losing face in front of subordinates could end a military career. So Kreshtal would continue to pursue, but he would likely make a mistake in doing so. And that mistake would be the opening the Meridian needed. Claire Adams reported from the sensor station that the lead Valorian ship was now showing clear signs of system stress. The radiation was damaging the ship's electronics in unpredictable ways. The captain was pushing forward anyway, but the vessel could not maintain maximum speed without overheating critical systems. Nathan nodded. He told the crew that they were winning this engagement. but not in the way military officers would typically define winning. They were not destroying the enemy. They were making it impossible for the enemy to accomplish its objectives. Nathan explained the strategy in simple terms. The Valorian ships were like massive predators, adapted for hunting in open spaces. They were strong and deadly, but they were also rigid in their thinking. They followed established procedures and expected those procedures to work. The Meridian was different. It was smaller and more flexible. The crew was trained to adapt quickly to changing situations. The ship itself was designed to be efficient rather than dominant in normal space. The Valorian vessels would win in a direct fight. But the Vex Nebula was not normal space. It was a place where size became a liability. Strength became a disadvantage. And flexibility became the most valuable quality a ship could possess. Lisa Morrison asked what would happen next. Would they try to reach the research station, or would they continue to evade the Valorian ships? Nathan answered that they would do both. They would continue to navigate through the nebula, buying time while they moved toward the inner colonies. The Valorian ships were becoming more damaged with each hour. Eventually, one of three things would happen. Either the ships would break down completely and have to withdraw, or the commander would realize that the pursuit was no longer worth the cost and would stand down. Or something else would happen that neither side could predict. Nathan stood up and told the crew that he needed them to maintain their focus and their discipline. They had already survived an encounter that should have killed them. The merchant vessels should have been captured or destroyed hours ago. The fact that they were still flying and still mobile was a victory in itself. As the meeting broke up and the crew returned to their stations, Nathan went to the bridge and reviewed the tactical display. The three Valorian ships were no longer in a tight formation. They were spread out, each struggling with different system failures and environmental challenges. The lead ship was still trying to close the distance, but it was moving more slowly. The radiation was taking a heavy toll. The second ship had fallen far behind and was now considering withdrawal. The third ship was barely keeping up with the formation. Nathan noticed something interesting on the tactical display. The radiation storms were becoming more violent. The pattern he had documented in previous journeys showed that the worst storms would come in about 2 hours. When those storms hit, the Valorian ships would have to reduce speed even further. They might be forced to create safety barriers around their vessels, which would reduce their ability to maneuver. Nathan called Claire to the captain's station. He asked her to prepare a new message for Crystal. The message would be direct and professional, with no hostility in the language. Nathan told Claire to transmit a message stating that the Meridian was a civilian cargo vessel carrying medical supplies. Nathan wanted the message to acknowledge that the Valorian collective had been pursuing them, but to propose a different kind of solution to the situation. Nathan told Claire to offer a formal customs inspection at the next neutral port. All cargo would be made available for examination. All documentation would be provided in full. This would satisfy any legitimate concerns about the vessel's manifest. Claire looked confused. She asked if Nathan was suggesting they surrendered to the Valorian forces. Nathan explained that he was not surrendering. He was offering the Valorian commander a way to exit this situation with his reputation intact. Customs inspections were routine. They happened to merchant vessels regularly. If the Valorian commander accepted the inspection at a neutral port, he could report to his superiors that the pursuit had accomplished its stated objective. In reality, Nathan knew that by the time they reached any neutral port, the political situation would have evolved significantly. The Galactic Commerce Authority would have filed preliminary reports. The Independent Systems Alliance would have opened its own inquiry. Crestola's superiors would have determined whether continued military action in the region was worth the diplomatic costs. But on the surface, the inspection offer gave the Valorian commander an exit strategy. It gave him a way to stop pursuing without losing face in front of his crew. Claire transmitted the message. Kreshtal received the transmission and studied it carefully. He had been in the military for centuries. He recognized what was happening. The human captain was offering him a way out of an increasingly difficult situation. Kreshtal looked at his tactical display. The second ship was reporting critical shield failures. The third ship was still struggling with radiation damage. The lead ship, his own command vessel, was suffering from system failures that his engineers could not explain quickly enough to be helpful. He had three choices. He could continue the pursuit and risk more damage to his fleet with uncertain results. He could order an attack on the merchant vessel, but that would trigger direct intervention from the Galactic Commerce Authority. Or he could accept the inspection offer and claim victory. After 36 hours of pursuing the meridian through the Vex Nebula, Kreshtal made his decision. He responded through official channels that the merchant vessel's offer of formal inspection was acceptable. The pursuit would stand down. The Valorian vessels would withdraw from the nebula to await the inspection at the designated neutral port. When the message came through on the Meridian's communication system, Nathan felt something release inside his chest. His crew had done it. They had survived an encounter with a superior military force, and they had done so through cleverness, discipline, and an absolute refusal to accept that the situation was hopeless. Kevin was the first to celebrate in the engine room, raising his hands and shouting with the pure joy of survival. The rest of the crew, watching their screens and monitoring their stations, felt the same relief wash over them, but Nathan remained calm. He told the crew that they still had work to do. They still had to reach the research station. They still had to navigate through the rest of the nebula. And they still had to participate in the formal inspection at the neutral port. The hunt was over. 6 months after the pursuit through the Vex Nebula, Nathan Brooks received an invitation to speak at a major symposium. The Galactic Commerce Authority was holding a conference focused on adaptive navigation and tactical improvisation in extreme environments. Nathan was being invited as a panelist because the Meridian's passage through the Vex Nebula had become a case study in how civilian vessels could survive encounters with superior military force. The symposium was held on a massive orbital platform that hosted thousands of merchants, military officers, and political representatives from dozens of species. The platform was a marvel of engineering, with docking facilities for ships from every major civilization in known space. Nathan did not feel like an expert. He still considered himself a simple cargo captain who had done what any good captain would do. He had protected his crew and his ship. He had used the tools available to him. He had refused to accept defeat, even when the situation seemed impossible. But others saw his actions as something different. They saw proof that a small civilian vessel could outthink a military force with vastly superior capabilities. Nathan found himself in conversations with captains and commanders from cultures he had barely heard of. A Valorian officer asked him about his methods. A human commander from an independent colony wanted to know his decision-making process. A Trade Federation representative wanted to understand how he had maintained crew morale in a situation that most would have considered hopeless. The most striking conversation came from Captain Yuki Tanaka. She was a human who commanded a deep space exploration vessel for one of the independent human factions that had spread across the galaxy. Yuki had followed the entire sequence of events through the communication logs and official reports. She approached Nathan after one of the panel discussions. She was tall and athletic, with the bearing of someone who had spent most of her life in space. She introduced herself and told Nathan that she had reviewed all of the tactical records from his encounter with the Valorian fleet. I told Nathan that he had done something remarkable. He had fundamentally changed how other species viewed humanity. Before the incident with the Valorian collective, humans were seen as useful because they were adaptable and relatively intelligent. They were industrious and could be relied upon to handle difficult tasks. They were good at following orders and completing missions. But after the pursuit through the Vex Nebula, humans were being recognized as something different. Other species were beginning to understand that humans could outthink opponents with far superior technology. They could recognize the psychological and political dimensions of conflict beyond simple military engagement. They could transform seemingly impossible situations into opportunities for survival and success. YUK. I explained that she had already seen the results of this changed perception. 2 independent colonies had requested specifically that human officers be assigned to their defense forces. A scientific research expedition had refused to depart without human crew members because of their reputation for adapting to crisis situations. Several trading companies had significantly raised the insurance rates for vessels that pursued human traders without formal authorization. Humanity was beginning to develop a reputation in the galaxy that was far more valuable than simple military strength. Humans were the species that survived, the species that adapted, the species that could turn a losing situation into a winning one through intelligence and determination. Nathan listened to Yuki's assessment with a mixture of pride and humility. He had not set out to reshape galactic perception of humanity. He had simply been doing what any good captain would do, flying his vessel safely, protecting his crew, using every tool at his disposal to accomplish those objectives. He told Yuki that he was just a merchant captain. He was not a hero or a legendary figure. He was simply someone who had refused to give up when things got difficult. YUK. I smiled at him. She told Nathan that that was exactly why his actions meant so much. He had not done anything superhuman or impossible. He had simply done the right thing with intelligence and determination. That was something that other people could learn from. That was something that could be copied and repeated. She explained that word of his success was already spreading through human communities across known space. Young captains were studying the tactical records of the Vex Nebula passage. Military academies were using his decisions as case studies. Human officers in various navies were being trained to think in the adaptive, flexible way that Nathan had demonstrated. A reputation was being built. Not the reputation of one exceptional person, but the reputation of an entire species. A species that could think its way out of problems. A species that valued survival and adaptation above rigid adherence to doctrine. On the final night of the symposium, Nathan stood in an observation window, looking out at the vast expanse of space. Lisa found him there, as she often did during their time together on the Meridian. She asked him what he was thinking about. Nathan told her that he was thinking about the Meridian's route back home. They had 3 cargo runs scheduled, and then they would be in home station for repairs and resupply. Nothing remarkable about it. Just ordinary work continuing after an extraordinary event. Lisa smiled. She told Nathan that the Valorian encounter would be extraordinary for the crew forever. They had beaten impossible odds and had done so by being creative, disciplined, and brave. But Nathan understood something deeper. What had happened in the Vex Nebula was only the beginning. The reputation that had been established there would attract more challenges. Other militaries would want to test human capabilities. Other commanders would want to see if the stories were true. Other species would begin to treat human vessels and human negotiators with a new level of respect. But humans have been facing challenges and proving themselves for thousands of years. On Earth, humans had survived ice ages and natural disasters. They had survived wars and famines. They had crossed oceans in wooden ships. They had learned to fly. They had traveled to the moon and beyond it. The Meridian and its crew had simply continued a tradition that ran through humanity's entire history. The tradition of facing impossible situations and finding a way to survive and prevail. Nathan told Lisa that they should return to the ship. They had cargo to prepare and courses to plot. The galaxy was waiting, and humanity was ready to meet it. As they walked back through the station, Nathan thought about Kreshtal and the Valorian Collective. He wondered if other Valorian commanders had heard the story. He wondered if they understood now that size and firepower were not the only things that mattered in conflict. He wondered if humanity's presence in the galaxy had been permanently changed by what had happened in the Vex Nebula. The hunter had become the hunted, and the hunted had proven to be far more dangerous than anyone had expected. That lesson would echo across the galaxy for years to come. Nathan Brooks, a simple merchant captain, had changed something fundamental about how the galaxy viewed humanity. He had shown that humans could survive. Humans could adapt. Humans could win even when they were supposed to lose. And that reputation, once established, would never fade away.